I think I'm live. I'm reading out of Winged Pharaoh, a book written by Joan Grant. It is a book of her far memories. It plays before the flood and before Babylon in ancient Egypt. She is the daughter of Pharaoh and is now Pharaoh herself, co-ruling with her brother Nea. And we are now in the fifth part of this book, chapter 9, Expedition to Punt. 6 months after I became Pharaoh, messengers brought news that our southeastern boundaries were being raided by the people of Punt, who this year had sent no tribute. Nea set forth to teach them wisdom, and with him went 10,000 soldiers of the royal army. This army is under the personal command of Pharaoh and is called upon only in time of war. Each warrior noble raises 100 men from his own estate. They're his friends, for they are together from childhood, and they learn spear throwing and the fighting of arrows from the same teachers as their overlord. If any of them are killed in battle, their wives and children are looked after as members of their master's household. Each warrior is given a house to live in with his family, land on which to grow vegetables, and as much grain from the granaries as he needs for bread, and a second measure for barter. Most nobles give their warriors a jar of beer every new moon, and a roll of coarse linen and one of wool every year. Before Nea started, he reviewed his troops. There were 5,000 bowmen, 1,000 men armed with a mace, and 2,000 spearmen. Over every 100 there was a captain, and to each 50 captains a captain of captains. There were 2,000 grain carriers, tentmen, cooks and others who looked after the food, water and baggage. All were armed with a short sword, which they wore in a sheath from their belt. It was used as a hunting knife as well as for fighting. Each man had a linen headdress to protect him from the sun, a simple form of the Sphinx headdress, and a woolen cloak with which on the march he carried as a pack, and which he wrapped himself when he slept. Captains wore armlets of gold, and their Sphinx headdresses were striped in green and scarlet. Each captain had a standard on which were his emblem and the emblem of his nome, and his 100 wore these emblems upon the band of their headdress. No horses were taken on the expedition, for since there was no longer trade with Zuma, horses were very scarce in Kham. In the old days, stallions from Zuma were exchanged for gold, ivory, perfumes, and malachite, but they would sell us no mares, lest we should breed our own horses and no longer give such high exchange for theirs. 5 mares had been captured in the last battle against the Zumas, and there were now 50 horses in the royal stables. They were amongst our most precious possessions, and if a plague should strike the stables, there would be no horses in Kham. In time of war, the chariots of Pharaoh, of captains, and of captains are drawn by 2 white asses. One day we hope to conquer Zuma and the people to the east of them, and then every noble could drive his own horses. With the army went 4 healers, 2 young seer priests, and 6 looking girls. Every day news was brought to me from the temple of Nea's progress, and long did I pray to Ptah to protect him, and that he should return victorious. The army travelled downstream in 90 sailing barges. At the mouth of the river they sailed eastwards to the beginning of the narrow land between the 2 waters. Here they disembarked, and they marched for 4 days, until they reached the narrow sea, where a fleet of 100 ships awaited them. Then they sailed southeastwards along the coast and landed on the northern shore of Punt, which was sparsely garrisoned, for they expected that any attack from Kham would come from the desert side. The royal city of Shebastes, their king, was 4 days' march from the coast. Nea divided his troops into 2 encircling wings, so that they attacked the city upon both sides at once. The armies of Punt were a wild rabble, and they soon broke before the measured lines of our soldiers, who advanced upon them relentlessly as a flood. Then Nea encircled the city and waited for their surrender, for he had gone to show them the might of calm and not to destroy their people. On the third day, Shebastus came from the city, bearing tribute. He knelt down and touched Nea's foot with his forehead in homage, swearing fealty to Khan. And he told Nea that he would cut off the hands of 2,000 warriors to show his sorrow that they had ever raised their hands against the lands of Atad. And Nea replied that he would grieve to think Shebastus should do something that would cause him, Shebastus, to be maimed 2,000 times, and that instead he must show his loyalty by making our laws the laws of Punt. Nea stayed in the city of Shebastus 40 days, while the chiefs of every tribe and the headmen of every village swore fealty to him as their overlord. Then Nea returned homewards across the desert, for he wished to visit Nakish, and the people of Punt, who looked upon him as their deliverer from oppression, sorrowed when he left them, and they sent 200 bearers with the army to carry their tribute. The next chapter is chapter 10, the Golden Link. How much more caring were they in those days than they are now, if you think of the veterans, eh? Wow, we've come a long way down. Have a good evening.